So, let's continue with movies that changed our lives. So, thank you to David, Tommy, Andy, and Robin for your comments there. And it's just amazing listening to the movies that really impacted you. Robin was Ghostbusters in the Curzon, I think, and I can only imagine what that was like, at 9 years old, seeing that on the big screen. There's bits of that I still find oddly frightening now, even though it's such a funny, colourful, vibrant, inventive movie, and of course a screenplay that's much admired and taught across the industry. Very very successful film. David talked about Alien, and yeah, what a standout film. The more I see that film, the more I appreciate the acting in particular, but also the art direction, as you were saying, David. It was the first time that science fiction looked believable. The world of freight in the future was oily, dirty. There was old polystyrene cups with cigarette butts in them. It wasn't that kind of tinfoil suit, take me to your leader sort of sterile kind of sci-fi utopia that we often see. Yeah, absolutely marvelous film, great script, so lean, so much done with so little. Great use of light and shade, and as you said, the presence of the aliens felt throughout the movie. I know you see very very little of the actual monster itself. So just a stunning piece of art direction, superb acting, beautifully directed, and all the more reason why Prometheus was such a terrible disappointment. I really at a bit of a loss as to how that script got into that kind of shape. But so let's have a look then at a couple of other little movies. One that was a very significant film for me, again when I was a kid, was Robin Hood. It was the animated adventure, and Robin Hood was played by a fox, and not in the kind of like Shannon Tweed sense. He was a little animated fox. And at the end of the movie, there's this sort of, the climax of Act 2 is always, as you guys know, is the culmination, the climactic confrontation between protagonist and antagonist. Of course, none of that was rattling through my mind when I was 8, sitting there watching it in the tonic. But there's a hail of arrows, XYZ is all happening, and then next thing we see is Robin Hood's little hat with his feather in it, and it's floating down a river with all these arrows through it. And I remember turning to my dad and going, is he dead? Is he going to be okay? And Dad said, well, we'll just have to wait and see. So why that's significant is because I was really, really upset, and I really liked Robin Hood, and I really hoped he was going to be okay. But I think that is the last time that I watched a film and had that suspension of disbelief, because once you played that trick on somebody, and they turn up later on and actually he was okay after all, and obviously as a 9-year-old you're not familiar with the codes and conventions of genres and all that kind of stuff, thank God. You really did buy into the fact that maybe he really was dead, and I think it's the movie is significant for me insofar as I think it's the last time that I wholeheartedly bought into that suspension of disbelief. Ever since, you always kind of thought, well, I remember what happened to Robin Hood, there's every chance he'll be okay. And then of course when certain movies play against that genre, like To Live in that convention of, well, the hero's always okay in the end, I can think of Psycho, To Live and Die in LA, and certain aspects of The Last Detail, where those conventions are played against. Certainly if you watch Game of Thrones, it's absolutely shocking and gripping, for the very reason that you just don't know what's going to happen to any of the characters, including the lead characters, from one minute to the next. And it's very invigorating, keeps you on the edge of your seat when you realise that, anything goes in these stories. If you've seen Game of Thrones, you know what I mean. Okay, so that was Robin Hood. The other movies that really touched me, I think it was Andy or Tommy mentioned, I think it was Andy said about The Elephant Man. And that's a very, again, lovely movie from the point of view of such a beautiful looking film, shot I think by Freddie Francis in that glorious sort of tri-X black and white, directed by David Lynch. I think it was Mel Brooks produced it, and they had seen Elephant Man and kind of went, well, this guy is so deranged that he's the man to bring to life this kind of cruel vaudeville freak show circus environment of Dickensian, I think it was Dickensian, maybe Victorian Edwardian England. And it had the perfect visual atmosphere, the mise en scène for that movie. And again, going back into personal affection, The film's important to me because at the time I was growing up in the church, which took, I mean, it was a hardcore evangelical church in retrospect, and I do remember certain visiting ministers prevailing against the house of the devil, the picture house of the whore of Babylon, as people referred to the cinema from time to time. And there were certain people that had a kind of liberal attitude to, you know, it's okay to go to the cinema, but there literally were people who were kind of like deep South Baptist types, you know, and it was like, if you went to the cinema, you were in cahoots with Beelzebub himself, and your soul was in jeopardy. We had a very enlightened and lovely pastor, came from Modesto in California with his wife and family, and still love him to this day. Went out to visit him subsequently, and Wes and Leonie came out and they became our ministers. And I remember one of the time at the youth fellowship, Wes said, "Well, look, tonight we're going to show you guys a movie," and it's not. And I, you know, even then I knew that most Christian films were absolute crap. You know, they were basically pontificating tracts, if you like, you know. And he said, "Well, this isn't by a Christian filmmaker. This is a guy called David Lynch, but I want to show you this film because it's a very important film about compassion." And he showed us that to us, and I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the youth fellowship when that was over. And we were all, you know, teenagers, so we're very self-conscious about, you know, blubbing in front of our chums and the girls that we wanted to impress and so on. But I love that film and still do, because it's one of the I think it was the first film or the standout film for me that actually had such a moral impact that I remember at the end of that swearing to myself that I would treat human beings better as far as I possibly could, and I failed many, many times. But I left that film left me with such a sense of compassion and a need to be kind to people, especially people who are downtrodden or oppressed or reviled by other people. And it's a film with such compassion that it really made an extraordinary impact on my life. And I really encourage you to see it. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. Visually, it's a beautiful film morally. And it's an amazing true story. Outstanding performances from John Hurt and Anthony Hopkins, who's just wonderfully noble and inspiring in that film. And Anne Bancroft is his wife. So, an extraordinary movie, great piece of direction from David Lynch. So, we've had Robin Hood, The Elephant Man. I'm going to leave today with another beautiful black and white film, Wings of Desire, which I saw at university in the midst of a sort of crisis of faith. And the film, directed by Wim Wenders, I think it came out in 1991, 1991, something like that. It's a story of two angels who live in Berlin, in modern day Berlin at the time, and they have the ability to fly and walk through walls and so on and so forth. And they can go anywhere that their consciousness and will wants them to go, so they can walk through subways, and everywhere they go, they can hear the thoughts of the people around them, and sometimes they'll just sit and listen to them, or sometimes they'll put an arm around somebody who's grieving or confused, or sometimes they sit together in this Mercedes showroom and enjoy sitting in the leather of this beautiful car and looking out and watching the world go by, and then they compare notes of the things that they've observed about humanity through the day. Now, Peter Falk is over in Berlin at the time making a movie about the Nazis, okay? So it has this whole German cinema sort of deconstruction, self-reflective, postmodernist thing going on with kind of movies within movies, a movie about a new vision of Berlin. And of course, Peter Falk, in the movie, plays somebody who has a sort of psychic sensitivity, can actually see angels. And he's aware, he catches some of these guys on and he befriends one of them. One of the angels falls in love with this trapeze artist, and he decides that he will sacrifice his immortality to become a mortal human being, to be imbued, to dwell in flesh and blood, to feel cold and heat and pain, taste coffee, to burn his lips, to be a solid flesh and blood human being, so that he can be in love with this woman. But it means leaving the angelic realms and so on. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful love story, kind of meditation on what it is to be a human being, a spiritual being, a flesh and blood being, what it is to lose touch with our spirituality. And Lou Reed's in it as well, Peter Falk's in it. It's just...
Sorry, one more thing, Lieutenant. Bear with me for what is possibly the worst Peter Falk impression of all time. but I gotta do it. You understand?
So Peter Falk's in it. I urge you to go and see it. The cinematography by Robbie Mueller is absolutely extraordinary, and it's a beautiful, beautiful film. It is a little pretentious, but so be it. And of course, it was remade with Nicolas Cage and some other guys in Hollywood. I haven't seen the film. I'm not casting aspersions on it, but to me, I'd rather leave that memory perfect. It was 2 days before my feet touched the ground after watching that film. It put me in touch with, again, a world that I had lost touch with and that I desperately wanted it to be a real world. Oddly enough, now I have no problems whatsoever believing in a world full of angels and demons and other beings that interact with us. To me, that's the way the world is. But at that point in my life, I think as a young man in the midst of, university and very kind of academic Newtonian worldview of just wear meat suits running around, get a degree, get a job, and then you die, tough shit. There was something very magical about that movie, and of course Bruno Ganz plays the lead angel. Now, actors, I mean, if you look at the work of Bruno Ganz, he can literally play an angel, with absolute, somehow just brings that to life with such humanity, paradoxically. And equally he's famous, of course, for playing Hitler. So if that's not range, I don't know what is. One of the most extraordinary, humane, compelling, powerful, sensitive actors you could ever wish to have the pleasure of watching for hours on end. Okay, so there you go, guys. Thank you so much for your feedback. We'll continue. I think next up might be Taxi Driver. But please let me know your thoughts on these and your own favourite movies. Okay, thanks, God bless, speak soon, bye.